Hey guys, this is Connor over at Soapbox Games, and I just wanted to say thank you and welcome to my first YouTube video on my channel. Oh my god, applause. Thank you. No, you're too kind. Oh, flowers. Oh my gosh. If you're listening to this, I really just want to say sincerely thank you for clicking and watching. This is my first attempt at actually trying to do something that I've always wanted to, and it's been a little bit of a bumpy start for my channel in recent weeks, but nonetheless, we're here and ready to piss some people off. So now that the formalities are out of the way, I just wanted to make this video about something that's been on my mind in recent weeks. And sadly, what's been on my mind is 2020's Marvel's Avengers. And seeing how the Wakanda expansion for the game is due out in less than a week as of recording, I just wanted to make this video before it releases as sort of a retrospective, but mainly a refresher, basically giving you guys a general overview of the path the base game has taken since release, along with being a bit of a expectation check for this Black Panther expansion. Now, for those of you who have been living under a rock, but I doubt that there's many of you who read the title of this video and played the game that didn't already know that Marvel's Avengers launched kind of rough. And by kind of rough, I mean really fucking rough. And even me saying that, I think, is putting it a bit too kindly. I think for the most part, if you've played the game, whether you liked it or not, you can probably agree with my overall statement. And I just want to preference this before we go any further by saying, I don't think Avengers is completely without merit, but this is for sure one of those situations where the flaws really do tend to outweigh any of the good that the game does. But hold your fucking ponies, Mahoney, alright? We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So let's take a step back for a moment and sort of review what exactly happened to this game and why it's considered by many to be such a failure, along with discussing kind of the unknown, up in the air future of this game past the Wakanda expansion. Because, to put it frankly, I don't know how much longer this game has in the eyes of its publisher, Square Enix. If I was a betting man, I'd bet Avengers maybe has another year of Crystal Dynamics supporting it. But in reality, it might just be another 6 months. I mean, like I said, everything's up in the air. We really don't know. So let's kind of start from the beginning. This game was originally announced with the teaser trailer back in 2017 during Square Enix's E3 showcase. This was basically coming in hot off the heels of Marvel games, kind of doubling down on their new mission statement that they were finally going to take and treat the games division of Marvel serious again, delivering these big AAA experiences. For those that are not aware of Marvel's past in games, for a long time the quality of these titles varied. Sometimes you would get a Wolverine Origins or a Spider-Man 2, and other times you'd get X-Men Destiny or that MCU licensed Thor game. Their first step to sort of put their money where their mouth was announcing a new Spider-Man game that was in development at Sony, and it would be exclusive to the PS4. Picking Spider-Man as the first real dip back into games was extremely safe for Marvel, seeing as Spider-Man had a pretty good track record in the past. That's not to say there aren't terrible Spider-Man games, because believe me, there are, bud. And, but the essential formula and path was already paid for them to make another good one of those. In 2016, Sony would debut the first real footage of Spider-Man PS4 with the cinematic story trailer. The hype wouldn't stop there. It would carry on into the following year's E3, where Sony finally showcased gameplay at their event. 2018 was the actual release date for the game, and it was met with unanimous praise, essentially putting Insomniac for some back in the big leagues, along with leading a way for new Marvel-related games. And I'm kind of bringing this up because Spider-Man's release, praise, but most importantly, sales numbers, let fans who were excited for new attempts at Marvel-related IP have a certain level of expectation moving forward. And the main expectation, at least to me, was that Marvel-related properties from now on would be the same quality of 2018 Spider-Man. And when it was announced in 2017 that Crystal Dynamics would be developing the new Avengers game, people had pretty high hopes for the title. At that point in time, Crystal still had a lot of goodwill with the general gaming audience for their work on the Tomb Raider reboot. Even I have to say that those games are extremely fun, well-made, narrative-driven experiences that pay a lot of respect to the legacy of Tomb Raider. And despite the reception of the last game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, people were still holding out hope that Avengers would be good. And, looking back, I don't think it was crazy for people's expectations of Crystal in particular to be kind of high, since they were a studio that had experience in making narrative-driven third-person action-adventure games. And frankly, that's exactly what fans wanted the Avengers game to be. However, a lot of that hope would quickly get stomped out at Square Enix's 2019 E3 event, where Crystal would finally debut the project's first trailer. Let's just say that the trailer was kind of received badly. Immediately from the jump, the main criticisms were how uncanny Crystal's character models look like a blander version of MCU actors. I remember watching Kinda Funny stream in particular and having to pause the live stream when the Avengers had their assemble moment on screen. Now, I'm not going to say that they look like knockoff MCU actors, but I mean, come on, son, they kind of do. But we're not done yet, folks. No, because the thrill ride of the announcement wasn't over yet, because the biggest info about the game's structure hadn't even been talked about yet. And that info would be how Marvel's Avengers would become a live service game. Now, when that bomb dropped, and I mean it was a bomb to a lot of fans, I think everyone watching and everyone in attendance collectively put our head in our hands. I distinctly remember me with this look of disgust in my face when they were describing what their service would be, and me just saying, why would you do this, Crystal? Avengers E3 troubles really didn't stop there. After the showcase, social media got to work like it always does and started seriously shitting on the game, with the main criticisms being the ones that I listed. Avengers wasn't getting much love from most gaming outlets either, since almost every reaction to the closed-door demos were all either saying how average it looked and how uninteresting and clunky the combat looked. But to me, this was clearly step one in this game's road to failure, and it surely wouldn't be its last. Avengers officially released in September 4th, 2020 to extremely middling, it's extremely middle of the road reviews. It would only get worse for Avengers since the pandemic hit, and it would ultimately disrupt their supposed content release schedule, leaving a lot of fans who really actually liked the game despite its flaws asking Crystal why it was taking so long to drop new content. But now that we have essentially gone over the initial reception to Avengers, this next part of the video is where I'm going to tell you my 3 biggest problems that the game is still currently facing, and most likely why it won't change, as well as speaking about what I think the game does right. Now, this isn't an official review, but it will serve as a reinforcement of my original claims as to why the game is considered such a failure by so many. So, over the past 2 weeks, I've been replaying the entirety of the Avengers campaign, as well as its 2 add-ons introducing Hawkeye and Kate Bishop as playable characters, and I have to say, honestly, I walked away a lot higher on the game than I did initially at its launch, and that sentiment was something that I didn't think was going to change in me replaying it. So, what exactly was different? Well, what I really think it came down to is that since the discourse around the game has essentially, for all intents and purposes, died out, I really didn't have anyone in my ear pointing out what should and shouldn't concern me in terms of the game's flaws, which would allow me to sort of wipe the slate clean, even though I remembered a little bit of my time with it. to go in to the game on this second playthrough as unbiased as I could, forming my own opinion without the impressions of others lingering in the back of me noodle. Now, that didn't mean that I completely forgot about my time with the game, like I said, because a lot of the same problems that I had with the game then, I still do now, even though I'm a bit more positive on the experience as a whole. But Connor, what could have possibly have changed your mind? Glad you asked, dumbass, because you see, in my opinion, Avengers' two redeeming qualities lie within its narrative and its combat. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Avengers' storyline is anything amazing or even something we haven't seen before, because to be honest, this game's story is a by-the-books, B-tier Avengers storyline, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Frankly, it's a serviceable story that gets the job done, and it does hit certain highs that you would want from a title like this. And as a comic book fan, you can clearly see that Crystal has plucked different elements from both the source material as well as the current MCU continuity. For example, the whole premise of the Avengers breaking up due to a tragic event that may or may not have been caused by them, only to come back together bigger, badder than ever, loosely plays around with general comic book concepts that we've seen with the Avengers before. You know, most notably, they even make a reference to Brian Michael Bendis' divisive 04 Avengers Disassembled run. These sort of references are littered all throughout the game in the form of actual characters, side conversations, mission dialogue, codex entries, even in the naming of certain quest lines. I think this sort of referential treatment is most noticeable really with Hawkeye's add-on. Characters like Gil and Lucky make an appearance, along with Crystal writing Clint very similarly to how Matt Fraction does in his Heralded Hawkeye run. To me, when Crystal really leans into this, when they really lean into the comic book references and backstories, a lot of the inconsequential writing and dialogue, despite most of it being pretty meaningless, is ultimately better for it, giving some much needed depth and flavor to a very, very bland interpretation of the Avengers world. I ultimately feel like the blandness you see in the environments as well as the character designs is where the MCU's influence is most felt. Don't get me wrong, I love the MCU. It's amazing. It's something that hasn't ever really been done before on a cinematic platform. But one of my most common complaints with the MCU is how visually all of the movies feel a bit too samey, not allowing the films to really carve out their own identities. And I do get why that is, considering that they have a cinematic universe to uphold. But when Crystal tries to incorporate this sort of same homogenized MCU style into their game, it very much gives off Uncanny Valley vibes, along with clearly showing that the game itself has its own identity issues. Sometimes you can tell that the game doesn't know if it wants to be a straight up MCU ripoff or a much more nuanced comic accurate one, which ultimately leaves you with this hodgepodge of different continuities and eras the game is constantly making reference to. You do get used to the blandness in the end. However, I don't think you really ever stop noticing it. I don't mind it, and I actually even kind of like it. Specifically, I like a lot of the character models, but I would have liked to see Crystal do something differently. I know that every game nowadays wants to be this photorealistic, super HDR, 4K graphics, but a stronger visual style, whether that had been a more comic booky one, could have helped define this game's identity a bit more. There are some narrative set pieces in the story that also harken back to the MCU movies. Kamala running away from Hulk and the Chimera is clearly inspired by the Black Widow Hulk chase scene in the first Avengers. Or how there's an entire subset of side missions called Stark Realities where the Avengers have to shut down a giant-sized arc reactor, which is a callback to Iron Man 1. I also have to say, I like that Crystal chose MODOK as their main villain. He's typically not people's first choice, given he's kind of laughable if you know nothing about the comics, right? To you, he's probably just a guy with a big head floating in a chair, but he's pretty dangerous. He's a reputable villain in the Avengers Rogues Gallery. But sadly, he does fall a bit flat towards the end of the game, where they try to do this bait and switch and make Monica, who is essentially the right hand of MODOK in the game, the real big bad, essentially making MODOK and AIM her puppets. It is also a little strange seeing as how they introduce guys like Taskmaster and Abomination, but don't really do anything with them past a certain set of missions. But I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that when we get to the flaws in mission designs and things like that. But you would have thought, since they are reputable, that they would have played a little bit of a bigger role in the campaign, or at least shown up in the final fight, but sadly they don't. They're treated very disposable despite being sizable villains in the rogues. The performances are also what adds to the story's enjoyability. Kamala Khan's voice actress really brings the character to life, but more importantly makes the character likable and charming, which is important with teenage characters. I feel like most interpretations of teenagers are essentially insufferable. Now, Nolan North as Tony Stark has its moments, but they could have toned down the snarky, sarcastic one-liners a bit. I love Robert Downey Jr. too, you guys, but Tony doesn't always have to emulate his performance. Iron Man has been here before Robert Downey Jr. and will be after, but by far, Troy Baker as Bruce Banner is easily my favorite performance. He's not trying to be Edward Norton, and he's not trying to be Mark Ruffalo. Troy's Banner lies somewhere in between being comic accurate and somewhere in between being its own thing. I'd also even go as far as saying that without these performances and the back and forth banter between the Avengers, the story would fall even flatter than it already does sometimes. Like I mentioned before, the story is full of different set pieces, but more likely than not, that set piece usually involves an Avenger running from a collapsing structure or a wave of enemies. This is without a doubt probably the biggest bummer when pertaining to not only the narrative, but also the superhero fantasy that Crystal is supposed to achieve with a game like this. There are really only 3 set pieces that make you go, gee, I guess I felt like a superhero. The first one would have to be Iron Man ascending into space to reach a secret AIM space station. Ultimately, it's just a player flying upwards into the sky, aiming a reticle. But it's still a very cool Iron Man moment nonetheless, which is immediately followed by the number 2 moment, where Captain America and Iron Man are then escaping the same space station as a horde of killer robots try to stop them. The station is completely falling apart, and watching Cap run and jump off walls and having his iconic shield throw moment is pretty cool. The third and final one, and I think this is undoubtedly the best moment in the game, is when Kamala is facing a sentry and she essentially inflates herself to the size of the sentry. And even though I would have liked to see a fully fleshed out fight, it still serves as a really cool story beat and as Kamala's defining Avenger moment. Personally, I think that there weren't enough Avenger moments like Kamala's in the game. They try to give each Avenger their own time to shine, but they usually don't go far enough with that moment to reach its full potential. For example, the first time that Thor is back in action with the Avengers, fighting on the Chimera flight deck, to me, they don't go far enough. When Thor makes an entrance, it should feel like an oh shit moment, you know? Like a moment where you as the player actually get to live the power fantasy of being the god of thunder. Instead, the moment feels like, now I gotta remember how to fight as Thor, which to me completely lessens and ruins any of the impact and power fantasy that these characters are supposed to have when they have their first playable moment in the campaign. But to wrap it up, I really did enjoy my time with the Avengers campaign as a whole. They did what they were supposed to do and sold me enough on these variants of the characters to want more from them, despite some of my critiques. I liked enough of what they have going on that I would 100% play a sequel that was hopefully a bit more refined and fleshed out than how the first game turned out. Alright, now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of Avengers gameplay, mainly focusing on the combat. To me, the combat is the star of the show. It's the reason to buy this game. It's the reason to play this game. It's really the only fully fleshed out system in the entire game that truly can keep you coming back. Each of the 8 playable characters come with their own set of skill trees. 3 in total. The first being the primary skill tree, which is essentially each Avengers moveset, unlocking different light and heavy attacks, along with unlocking other intrinsic skills for each separate character. The primary skill tree is where you'll most notably see a difference in how your Avengers moves and fights. For me, I focused on unlocking all of these first, frankly, because I wanted every character's moveset available before deciding, and yes, the pun is intended, the end game for Marvel's Avengers. From there, the second skill tree is the specialty tree, which mainly focuses on boosting the stats and effects of your Avengers' heroic and ultimate abilities. The third and final skill tree is called Mastery, which essentially just boosts your combat and intrinsic stats, like increasing melee damage, range damage, etc. Alright. But now that we got all of that nerdy shit out of the way, let's just jump straight into how it actually feels to play the game. And for me, Crystal knocks it out of the park in this regard. Each Avenger feels different enough when participating in the actual combat scenarios. Like I said before, you really start feeling and seeing the differences when unlocking more of their movesets, along with figuring out how each of the Avengers sort of fit in their roles, or at least the supposed roles that Crystal tried to carve out for them. For example, Thor and Hulk's intrinsic abilities are clearly meant to be used and applied like tank characters, or how certain heroic abilities for certain characters are meant for crowd control. You know, a good one would be one of the heroic abilities of Captain America is throwing his shield, which hits a ton of people in the crowd. Another one is like Hawkeye's basically auto-aim arrow. Honestly, when you're 100% engaged and you're aware of all those systems and you're using all of those systems and play like how Crystal Dynamics intends it, it really does feel like one big battle scene in the MCU. Now, when trying to define what the actual genre of the combat is, I usually just say it's a hodgepodge of different genres like brawler combat, hack and slash combat, even a little bit of like third-person shooting with characters like Black Widow and Hawkeye and Kate Bishop. And frankly, I love it. It's really addicting. And I've had so much fun just playing the game. You know, there is like this light element of combo system, not something like Arkham Knight or any of the newer Spider-Man games, but you are sort of building up combos in order to do takedowns on certain characters. You're parrying and blocking certain attacks that come in, right? And you know that from the certain white reticles or yellow reticles that come with when an enemy's sort of ramping up to hit you. But man, it really is the reason to play this game. So now we're heading towards the end of part 2, which means that it's finally time to talk about the 3 major flaws in Avengers that I don't think are easily as fixable as some people perceive them to be. Personally, I believe that from jump, Avengers is at a disadvantage due to some of its poor, fundamental, core design choices, right? And that first flaw might be the most important, but that first flaw is discussing how Avengers' loot system is just utter trash. And I'm not trying to be mean, and I don't want to be mean, but this is something that affects a lot of this game's design. In most modern live service games, loot is supposed to serve as the player's carrot on the stick, right? The thing you are constantly chasing. Loot should be the thing, along with fun, addictive combat, that keeps players coming back for more. It's supposed to be my excuse to binge play a lot of these live services games, repeatable content, right? That's why they make the content so repeatable in a lot of these live service games. So you grind and you chase after certain weapons or loots, but Avengers doesn't do that because its loot system is missing half of what makes grinding for loot fun. And that half is visually changing the appearance of your character's armor or weapons, right? The system that they have in place now is literally a stat chaser. That's the only purpose the loot serves. The only reason you need loot is to upgrade your character to a certain power level to participate in the repeatable content. But besides stat chasing, what purpose does loot serve? And ultimately it trickles down into a lot of certain design aspects, like I don't know, hello, the core gameplay loop. God. And you know what really bothers me? When you talk to people on Twitter about their loot system, to me, it clearly is like an indication that like you have never played a video game aside from Avengers, because everyone basically boils down to this one point in that I like the skin system because the skins make me look like the comic book versions. Hey, dummy, I know, like I just said, this is probably your first video game, but I don't know if you know this, but there's a thing called transmog that is available in a lot of these loot games, that where if you have different armor on of different sets, you can change the appearance of it to match the set you want, right? Man, it's like, it's not rocket science. It's not. The path has been paved and they ignored it. It reminds me of Anthem so fucking much. And what makes it worse is that Crystal Dynamics, and I'll get to this when I get to my third flaw, but they just ignore it. They don't address it. They don't even think that it's a problem. They don't have oh my God. I just can't sometimes with this game. I really love the combat so much, and I really love some of the just interactions with the Avengers, like I said, with the narrative, but God damn it, dude. The live service aspect of this game is just so bad. And I know I'm kind of rambling here. I'll get back on script in a minute, but I just don't understand how a lot of these modern loot games pitch it to publishers. Do they go in and be like, hey, yeah, we're going to do a live service game and it's going to be just as broken and shitty as every other live service game ever. We're not even going to try to attempt to make it better or as good as an experience, like a live service experience a couple years in. Like, I understand these games make a ton of money, but there's just certain things as a player that I just find unacceptable. And this is an extreme example of one. It's just so fucking frustrating. Like, come on, Crystal. It's not hard. Please fix this. And you know what, man? Like, it's funny because now I'm like so tired from this. They're not gonna fix it, because if they were to fix it, they would then have to change some of the core mission design involved around the live service aspects of it, right? And by that I mean the co-op missions, right? You can play up to 4 Avengers on a server, right? Which is weird. Why not just 5, like an actual Avenger squad? But whatever. And what it boils down to is that they drop you into this big sandbox area, and there's only like I think like 7 or 8 of these areas, right? Where it's like a snowy tundra, a mountain range, blah, 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 all this shit. And essentially it boils down to you, the Avenger, hey, we're going to give you this objective to reach the front of this AIM base. You reach the front, you go inside, you go down the elevator, you get to another door, then it's a video game rule of 3s. And then on the third and final room is where your actual objective lies. And what that objective could be, it could be meaning like holding a control point, destroying these little like engine things, stuff like that. And that is the main design of the repeatable content. Now, I will give Crystal some credit in that a lot of the higher powered activities that require you to sort of actually grind for the loot, even though loot doesn't matter, they're pretty well designed. There's a mission where at the end of the game you have to fight Monica, and that mission is actually pretty good. But besides that, the repeatable content is just not varied enough, and it doesn't really promote, like I said, players to want to repeat this content unless you're a psycho like me who just wants to see all of the skills unlocked. Now, like I said, the loot system would be a bigger overhaul that Crystal would need to do, but mission design is something they could easily have fixed long ago at like midway at the launch of this game, right? Like they could have just added more content, and there was planned for more content, and some content actually showed up in the game early and then disappeared and then was never seen again. But it's just you have such a good combat system. You have decent writing that makes these characters likable. Why can't you guys design missions aside from a control point one, like I said, or destroying certain like aim technology? Why can't you make something cooler? Why can't it be, all right, we're going to give these Avengers each specific roles to do? Like, you remember how GTA heists were, where Michael, Franklin, and Trevor all had their own roles to play in the heist? Why can't they do something similar to that with the Avengers, right? Like, make a mission where you're just facing one of those giant sentries, right? And each character needs to do their own little task, right? Thor, you gotta go for the head and the eyes because of your lightning. Hulk, you gotta go for the legs because you're the strongest. Iron Man, you gotta go for the core because that's where like all of his central technology is. Like stuff like that. Why can't they come up with something cool like that? All you get in terms of like fighting villains again are these villain sectors where you just keep fighting Abomination and Taskmaster over and over and over and over, and it's just not fun, man. And like I said, the only thing that has kept me going is just seeing the skill tree entirely be unlocked. So I'm gonna quickly get to the third and final flaw, and probably not speak as in depth as I usually would, frankly, because everything is so up in the air, and we'll get to it when we get to Black Panther, but I think things are willing to change with this flaw, and that flaw is monetization, and just how gross a lot of the monetization is in this game, and it kind of goes understated that, you know, for example, I spent I'm more money than I'm comfortable with sharing on a YouTube video on their currency for the marketplace, which is called units. And, you know, I bought a couple of the premium skins, and I bought the Chris Hemsworth one, which actually looks pretty freaking sweet, and I bought the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man one. And like I said, those being like premium top creme de la creme skins, they cost about like $10 per skin, right? And like prices range from there on. You know, there's like $900 900 unit ones, 700 unit ones, and those are like what, like $8, maybe $5, depending on the math. You can also buy other things in the marketplace like faceplates, emotes. Weirdly, you can buy like literal character takedown animations, which I don't like that. I feel like that should just be in the game from the jump. But like I said, it's a flaw. It's gross, and they should have fixed this a long time ago, but I'm not entirely sure if it's going to matter. And and I say I don't know if it's going to matter because as we get into the third and final section, I'll talk a little bit more about the up in the air nature of this game and how I don't know how much time this game has left, frankly. And monetization is definitely a big thing that I think is important in live service games. But frankly, when you're a game like Avengers that's kind of on the brink of destruction at any moment, it really, I'm sure the people over at Crystal Dynamics really don't care. And they're like, yeah, why don't we just try and see how much money, you know, because you got idiots like me out there, see how much money you can get from them, because you got, you know, like I said, people like me who want to make a YouTube video and want to look like Chris Hemsworth flying around as Thor. So, but hey man, with that said, let's get into the third and final section of this video, which is the War for Wakanda expansion section and the future of Marvel's Avengers, or maybe the lack of. All right, I'm going to keep this kind of fairly short. You don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. This is the end of the video if you didn't know. Thank you if you're still watching. Thank you for if you're still watching past the first 5 minutes. I know I sound like a pretentious asshole, but hey, hit that like and subscribe for your boy. But since we're at the sort of War for Wakanda Eve, it's the day before release, and I wanted to get this out about a week ago, where I had enough time to sort of speculate before impressions started coming out, but personal things happen. I'm an adult, and impressions have sort of hit the internet. The guy that I typically go to for content like this is Paul Tassi, who works over at Forbes. He also has his own YouTube channel. Please go check it out if you haven't. He's a really great guy. He knows his stuff, and he doesn't really seem to bullshit people, which I appreciate. And his overall impressions are probably how most people are going to feel after this 90-minute sort of demo a lot of journalists got to play at a Crystal event. And it's fairly positive, with a big emphasis on finally variety is starting to seep into their side content and their mission design. There are some new activities and new sort of hold the control point activities that are going to happen in Wakanda, along with they're starting to make the environments feel a little bit more distinct than how a lot of the environments do in the base game. A lot of people are talking about how wonderful and lush and green and beautiful Wakanda looks, and I would hope so, given that this is a setting that doesn't get used that much in video games, let alone the comics a lot of the time. So I'm very excited to hear that, but the majority of the praise from what I've heard is how well T'Challa plays and just how unique his style kind of is. A lot of people are saying he's a mix between like Captain America and sort of the older Arkham games style of combat, which is really cool to hear. I think I'm going to main as T'Challa. He is my second favorite Marvel superhero, the first being Spider-Man. So I've been kind of messing around these past couple of weeks with Thor and Captain America, trying to get them to 150. But I think I'm gonna finally just say fuck it and have T'Challa be my main for a lot of the endgame content. Now, they're still not addressing certain things, such as there is no loot overhaul coming. There is a quality of life sort of menus overhaul coming, which it looks okay. It looks like an improvement. I mean, we won't really know until we get our hands on it, but it is a little bit disappointing that they're still not addressing any of the really major flaws, right? They're addressing mission variety, which I'm happy about, but to go this long still without acknowledging your loot system is a little damning and damaging for your reputation, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I do have faith in Crystal Dynamics to deliver a good expansion. The sort of word to mouth right now is that it's going to be about 25 hours. I probably would take that with a grain of salt if I were you. I would say maybe within the range of like 10, 12, 15 to finish the campaign, and then obviously all of the repeatable content maybe will take you up to 25 hours. But nonetheless, I'm extremely excited for this expansion. I will do my sort of like mini review impressions once I'm done playing it, so be on the lookout for that. Hopefully I'll have something up by either next week or if worst comes to worst, the week after that. But this main part that I'm probably going to spend a decent amount of time with is just speculating on the future, right? And I'm glad that War for Wakanda is getting the love and shine that this game kind of needs. But like a lot of people who have played the 90 minutes, mainly I'm going off of a lot of Paul Tassi's opinion, I don't know if War for Wakanda is going to be the thing, the ultimate Taken King beyond light, right? That this game needs to make a huge overhaul, and it clearly isn't that. And I just hope that this isn't any indication that they have no plans on doing that, right? Past War for Wakanda, we know that Spider-Man is coming exclusively to Sony consoles. That is a bummer for a lot of Xbox players. I currently own a PS5. That's primarily what I play on. So I'm excited to play that. But it's going to be this really weird content drop, I think. I mean, are they going to allow the Xbox players to go into those maps, or are those maps exclusive, right? Like, if you're just kind of going off of a lot of Sony dealings, you would assume that you can only play as Spider-Man on PlayStation. But maybe sort of the loophole in that is that a lot of the other players get to access the maps and not miss out on that content. So we'll have to see. Past that, the rumors have sort of been that Winter Soldier, Captain Marvel, She-Hulk might be coming to the game. I would assume that at some point, maybe towards the winter or fall, they'll do another war table. But like I said in earlier parts of the video, I don't know how much longer they have. Right now, I don't think War for Wakanda is going to move units like they want, right? It's like I said, it's not their Taken King, it's not their Beyond Light, it's not this big sort of like 2.0. It's just a good expansion at the very least. And that's fine, that's okay. I'm excited to just play more content, but you have to start looking towards the future. You have to start asking these questions of, hey, are we going to like fully dedicate the studio for the next couple of years to this game? And if so, how do we convince Square Enix to allow us to do, a sort of like, it's funny, Square Enix, like a Final Fantasy 14 online sort of reboot, right? R 2.0, and what would even R 2.0 look like? And if I was to just spitball, make the loot meaningful, obviously, I'm not going to harp on that too much, right? Figure out a different monetization path. Like I said, maybe you should start thinking about actually charging for these characters, whether that be $5 or $10, right? Because nobody is going to want to continue buying nothing but skins in your marketplace. So they need to start thinking of that, as well as, all right, what is our next big expansion? Who do we introduce as the villain? What characters, right? Personally, I would like to see some X-Men come in. I would like to see maybe Wolverine or Colossus. Maybe Daredevil. I feel like Daredevil would be a pretty good fit in this game. If you want to get a little cosmic, maybe you introduce one of the Guardians. I feel like either Gamora or Drax would be really good. Maybe that's how you set up Thanos and the Infinity Stones. But nonetheless, I really hope that this game makes it another year, and I hope they're able to drop more content past Spider-Man, because frankly, I've invested a decent amount of money into this game, and I want to see it succeed like I know that it can. But once again, this is all speculation, this is all just guessing, and with that, I'm tired. It's 2:30 in the morning here. Like I said, thank you if you continued watching this video. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit rambly towards the end of this video. I know the beginning was very structured, but I kind of wanted to experiment a little bit. And if you're still watching this, please hit the like and subscribe. Please leave a comment down below to let me know what you thought of this video, what I should improve upon. But try not to be too mean to me. I am sensitive, so constructive criticism is welcome, hate isn't. But like I said, I hope to have another video up of just my impressions of the expansion by next week. And then after that, please be on the lookout for some other content on my channel. Another project that I'm going to have coming up is a sort of another retrospective of Mass Effect. That is a series that means a lot to me, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm probably going to do some Ghost of Tsushima stuff when the director cut comes out, and then from there it's just going to be sort of topical videos. I want to do one on sort of the console wars and currently the idiotic state of Twitter regarding that. And from there on, man, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Soapbox Games, and till then, see ya, stay groovy.